Hi, everybody. Excited to have this new show today. We have Kat James, and we're going to talk about a compelling perspective on the master hormone leptin. Now, maybe you've heard of the hormone leptin. A lot of people have. They don't understand what it is, how it works, and what you can do nutritionally about it to get a better balance with your metabolism. But that's why we have award-winning transformation author and leptin pioneer, Kat James. And she's transformed her body and her health against incredible odds and has helped countless others do the same over the last 2 decades through her once controversial nutritional protocol, which has gained recent scientific validation. So having saved herself from an autoimmune condition and eating disorders back in 1990, years before leptin was discovered in 1994, she pieced together an extremely odd protocol, reversing those ailments and dropping 10 dress sizes among countless other physical burdens. Kat then went on to do her own observational and practical work over the last 2 decades, working with doctors and their patients around this country and beyond. And now she's recognized as having created the only retreat-based program to consistently produce symptoms of recovered leptin function in the world. So this is really, really cool stuff. Also, she's been called a master of self-transformation by Self Magazine and the Jane Goodall of leptin, and has been featured at Omega Institute and in most major women's magazines, also in Life Extension, and she's been on PBS as well. So Kat, great to have you on the program.
Great to be on, Dr. Stengler. It's an honor. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And a lot of people have heard the term leptin. They think about metabolism and weight. My experience has been, and probably yours too, most doctors don't even really understand what the hormone leptin is, what it does, and what we can do naturally for a better balance. So before we get into that, let's talk about your personal story. You had a near fatal health issue that you had to overcome, and really transformed your health throughout the years and developed these really incredible nutritional recovery programs. So tell us more about that.
Sure. Oddly enough and ironically, I was in the beauty world, and I was a makeup artist, and I had an eating disorder that happened probably came on at puberty, I'd say, yes, because when those changes happen in a young woman at puberty, we often turn to diet books, etc. So I started dieting, and that developed my eating disorder, and eventually, about 12 years later, my liver started to fail. And they said there was no viral liver thing, so it was autoimmune. And I got myself out of the woods with supplements actually at that time. So that woke me up into the power of natural healing. But it wasn't enough to stop this thing that I had had since about 13. I went through binging and purging in high school. I stopped the purging part, but the binging to incapacitation was constant. And as much as I would try to stave it off, it was like a kind of a demon that had its way every evening for all of those years. And I literally was white knuckling my way through. So there was a powerful something that I thought was self-loathing or emotions or something that I needed to deal with, and I did. I dealt with my family issues and other issues that might have contributed to emotional things, but I wouldn't have known how biochemical it was until many years later when I had this incident where maybe a 4 or 5 hour stretch where I felt like a normal person. And it was so crazy. And I had eaten something unusual that day for me, because I'd made like a whole grain bread. I ordered these bags of grain from I think Idaho, and used them in my Vitamix. And this particular loaf of bread was brick-like, so I couldn't eat it. And so I said, maybe I can toast it. Well, that didn't work. Maybe I can, wait a minute, do I have any butter? I wasn't much of a fat eater. This was 1990 after all, and I knew that fat had more calories than carbs. So I put some butter on 2 brick-like pieces of bread and choked them down. And an unusual thing happened. 2 o'clock came around, and I had not thought about lunch or food. I didn't have this palpable, it's almost hard to describe, the sense of impending doom in my gut that I had all the time. Anxiety, and I call it the black cloud. And that didn't come, but the most amazing thing was not a thought about food until 2 p.m. What did I do? Well, I put some fat on there. Okay, tomorrow morning, I'm gonna put fat on one little brick-like piece of bread and put it on both sides And thus began my experimentation, because that same phenomenon happened again, but I couldn't get it to last 24/7 at all. And so after 2 years, I made something happen where at that point, overnight, the next morning, my rings were loose, my abdomen was flat, and the food in my refrigerator didn't look like food to me anymore. It was a very abrupt change, very, very sudden. I mean, I had just shopped a couple days before and I didn't really know what I was going to shop for. But I did come out of 7 years of vegetarianism right at that time, spontaneously. I heard myself order meat at a restaurant, a burger, actually. And I will tell you that that first burger after 7 years was quite something. And I was afraid of it. I was worried. I thought, oh my gosh, I had grossed myself out. And this isn't about, vegetarian version, but that just happened on its own. My body forced me to do it. And I felt incredible after that. But the main thing was different. It was a very unusual, very individualized point or threshold at which I had reached a fat ratio that I would only find out 14 years later, by incredible coincidence, was me retaining or regaining my function of the master hormone leptin in the body, which hadn't been discovered yet. The first coincidence was 4 years later, through my then human genetics researcher boyfriend, I was introduced to Dr. Jeffrey Friedman, who injected leptin into rodents and thought they were in for the biggest blockbuster drug in human history. And it didn't come to pass, because what happens when we take insulin or we take hormones, we become resistant to them. And very few people don't have enough leptin. We have too much. So the only way to regain sensitivity to it is dietarily. And there is no guideline and there's no way to know what works for that, because the dietary application is a frontier. And our nutrition studies are very lacking, because humans, A, they don't tell the truth in self-reporting studies, or else they don't remember what they ate, or B, they don't like captivity. So I thought, what if I trick people into coming along with me to these various locations, sometimes very remote, a tree house in a wild, or a castle in Scotland, and get them to eat my way? Maybe I could sort of see if what happened to me was a fluke, because after that turning point day, 10 dress sizes fell off. Gradually, there was no good day, bad day, no more dieting. And I mean, that's unbelievable to not be counting, keeping track of what I eat, and to have some strange signal tell you exactly when to stop eating right in the middle of a mouth-watering plate of food, when you've got still half of it left and you're like, what? And then the rodent studies caught up with me. The rodent studies then soon, abrupt appetite drop off after 3 days, 8,000 studies, and 15 years later, we learn that it's basically the body's compass that isn't working for anyone. So it's the modulator of our immune system. So we are not going to have today's cytokine storm, and it activates stem cells and NK cells and T cells. And so it modulates your immunity. It balances your autonomic nervous system, so you're not in what we are all in today, fight or flight, and then we go back to rest and digest. And it also heals the dopamine pathways, which was a huge part of my addiction and any addiction. And they've looked at the burnout dopamine receptor sites in the brain scans of people who have eating disorders or alcoholism or heroin addiction. The same burnout dopamine receptors. And now we probably have dopamine receptors burning out from video games and social media.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're actually calling it dopamine fasting to get off of social media. So for me, canker sores, dizziness on standing, 10 dress sizes, a heroin-like addiction to food, horrible rashes, peeling, oozing. You could peel off the top layer of my eyelid, all was oozing. I couldn't even use normal makeup. And just incredible depression, anxiety, all of this just lifted. And I could be 2 feet in front of, a high school classmate, which I did have that instance. And they looked at me and were angry at me for saying who I was. After 2 minutes, just said, you are not, Kat.
You're right.
People would
come. Yeah, I thought you were, fibbing to them, huh? Hey, Kat, a quick question on this. In medicine, what I found, you can never assume anything. So, for example, a patient comes in, they're overweight, they eat too many calories. Maybe some doctors assume, oh, the person has, a mental emotional problem. Now, in your case, and again, the point I'm getting at, we shouldn't assume anything. We should try and find out what's going on. But in your case, you had such profound effects when you changed your diet, which then, of course, had dramatic effects on your leptin, your metabolism, your neurotransmitters, and all that. What do you say to people in terms of, in our society, there's a lot of blame on mental, emotional factors as the major cause why people consume unhealthy diets or sweets or too many carbs, too many calories. I mean, it seems like with the example you gave, you have to have a balance. I mean, there always can be psychological, emotional stresses going on, but physical things could be the more dominant factor too for a person.
I now believe that. So, and the calories in, calories out, the law of thermodynamics applied to diet it's the hormonal response to food. It's not calories in, calories out. And in fact, as you, I'm sure know, people can eat a lot more calories than if you are a fat burner as opposed to a sugar burner. And in a leptin sensitive state, you're a fat burner. Then you're going to burn through fat like rocket fuel. But if you are in a famine perceiving mode with the brain, because times of plenty is what the brain perceives when you're in leptin sensitivity. And when we have, and this is why there's a real interesting discussion on fasting that I want to have.
Okay.
But when we are in famine mode, we store fat, we store excess carbs as fat. And I wanted to mention that in 2004, 14 years after this happened to me, as if the other coincidence wasn't enough. And I remember meeting the discoverer of leptin and thinking to myself, well, that's great that he's found some weight loss thing, but I've got something unbelievable. And I was standing in front of him thinking that. And then another 10 years later, Dr. Ron Rosedale, the foremost clinical expert on leptin, and arguably many believe insulin as well, he was at a book signing that I was at. And he heard what I had to say. And I said to the people, and there's no more portion control. There's not. Your body does it. Your brain just does it for you. It doesn't allow you to eat anymore. I said, but you can't spike your own blood sugar and thus insulin and leptin. But you have to eat a lot of fat. And that was when I saw this New York Times bestselling doctor's jaw drop. And I thought, oh, this is another one of those ignorant doctors. And instead, he's like this. And I walk up to him and I said, what did I get wrong? And he said, you don't have anything wrong. You're the only person who has it right. And he said, my clinic's been reversing type 2 diabetes in less than 2 weeks. And I said, what's taking you so long? And he said, well,
I mean, you're in a time period where people were, fat phobic back then, even if the doctors were.
It took a long time for that dark age to end, So I realize right now so many more doctors are so much more amenable to this. Yeah, but there's no more willpower needed, and that's the difference between this and keto, which excess protein turns to sugar. People don't realize that, so it's not about binging on protein. And there's an mTOR pathway that you're going to probably set off in keto or paleo. But are they better than low fat? Yeah, they are, and many people do it right. But I find the metabolically challenged people, especially with bad microbiomes who have serious sugar addiction, they always find the loopholes to exploit. And so what I've done over these years, 108 in-person programs, 50 online programs, is I take all the loopholes that I see, what loopholes people exploit, and I close them. And so people have a lot of success.